Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today we're plunging into a really thought-provoking personal story. It challenges, well, pretty much everything we think we know about healthy eating. You sent us some fascinating stuff, excerpts from a book called The Meat F1X, How a Lifetime of Healthy Eating Nearly Killed Me. So our mission today, let's unpack this author's pretty radical shift in diet. We'll explore his arguments against what most of us see as standard health advice. We'll look into why he felt his so-called healthy diet made him sick, the honestly surprising changes he went through, and what he thinks is just wrong with a lot of modern nutritional guidance.
Yeah, what's really interesting here, I think, is how this personal story becomes a kind of lens. So
Mhm.
look critically at the assumptions we all make about food, diet, even the advice we get from official places. It raises a big question, doesn't it? Can a diet that lots of people think is healthy actually be bad for for their well-being?
Okay, let's start with the author himself. Set the scene a bit. For 26 years, he wasn't just vegetarian, he was mostly vegan. It basically defined him. He called himself Mr. Whole Food, eating brown rice. You know, those healthy vegetable oils, lentils, beans, tofu, nuts, fruit, vegetables, all the stuff doctors often recommend now. But he was doing this way before it was trendy.
Right, and it's useful to know about his background, too. He talks about growing up in the north of England, 60s and 70s, a very Spartan food culture,
Yeah.
conservative. Processed food wasn't really a thing then. Meals were simple, meat, potatoes, couple of veg. People were super active, and get this, they ate tons of sugar but didn't get fat. Interesting, right. His grandparents eating traditional diets, lots of animal fats. He calls them tough bastards. They didn't have these modern degenerative diseases we see all the time now. So he had those early ideas about food, but later went full on into the whole New Age or whole food thing.
And here's where it gets really, really interesting. Despite this seemingly perfect diet, by his early 30s, things started falling apart health-wise. By 40, he says he was totally knackered, just wiped out. He had cholesterol levels of 9.2, like, Christ, that will kill you really high. That landed him a daily statin prescription. Plus, chronic acid reflux, constantly tired, needing afternoon naps, daily headaches. His eyesight was going. And maybe the worst part, chronic irritable bowel syndrome. IBS. He talks about hideous explosive bowel movements, having to run into pubs just to use the toilet. There was even a near brown trousering moment in Chicago. He calls it an arse-based issue, pretty bluntly. Said it ruined his quality of life for almost 20 years.
Wow, that really paints a picture, doesn't it? How could someone so dedicated to healthy eating end up feeling so bad? And so helpless, too. He mentions using creams for hemorrhoids, probably caused by the IBS, right? But they didn't work. He started thinking modern medicine was a big con. When a doctors who, he says, hadn't a bloody clue. They'd just say things like, oh, it'll probably go away on its own. Flippant advice. He felt like they hadn't even bothered to really understand his history, like they were still reading the introduction.
Then, the massive bombshell, as he calls it, his partner Dawn just says, we should eat meat. He said he went cold. But get this, just 24 hours after eating meat again, all his IBS symptoms, gone, vanished. He describes that first meat meal, a perfect medium-rare grass-fed filet steak, as mind-blowingly flavorful. One of the most profound moments of his life, he says. And he felt something totally new afterwards, not just full, but satiated. He describes it as a deep sort of primal satisfaction. It felt deeply innately natural, like he should have been doing it forever. So he started embracing fat on chops, chicken skin crackling, eating red meat maybe 4 or 5 times a week, and at the same time cut out the heavy carbs like potatoes and wheat and ditched all those vegetable oils except for olive oil.
And the changes weren't just digestive, they were dramatic.
Yeah.
IBS gone, yes. But also, no headaches for 20 months straight. His eyesight improved so much he stopped needing reading glasses. Even his libido, he notes, increased exponentially. But it wasn't just physical stuff. He felt more relaxed, less stressed, more emotionally stable, calm, mentally sharper too, recalling names, words, much easier. He also saw his partner Dawn recover from hypothyroidism and depression after a similar diet change. Made him wonder about his own mother's mental decline, if diet played a role there too.
Yeah, and his reaction to all this fury. He was furious with himself for sticking with a diet that made him sick for so long, and furious at the medical establishment for their, quote, ineptitude and inability to help when the fix for him turned out to be so simple. So that anger really drove him. He needed to understand how this could possibly happen.
Right, and as he digs into it, he finds a lot of what he calls alternative orthodoxies often get lumped under the low-carb label. Not necessarily super, super low carb, he says it, but definitely lower than your typical modern diet. A common thread seems to be focusing on the balance of omega-3 and omega-6 fats, and crucially, controlling inflammation. There's this growing agreement, he points out, that eating too many carbs from grains, potatoes, sugar, even too much fruit has really messed with our health, leading to weight gain, diabetes, depression.
Okay, let's break that down with some specifics he raises. First up, fats and cholesterol. He really hammers this point about confusing fat in food with fat on our body. The irony, right? He got fat on a low-fat diet. He points out that the whole danger of saturated fat is usually linked to raising cholesterol, which supposedly raises heart disease risk. But, he argues, for most people, how much saturated fat you eat impacts your cholesterol way more than eating foods that contain cholesterol, like eggs. He remembers things like egg beaters and egg white omelets being all the rage. Totally pointless, he thinks now. And he asks the tough question. If health authorities were 100% wrong about dietary cholesterol, why should we just automatically trust them now about saturated fats?
It's a strong challenge, isn't it? Makes you think.
Yeah.
And that leads him right into questioning things like statins.
Exactly. He was put on them back in 2001, told it was for life. He notes the research shows a benefit fewer deaths for people who already have serious vascular disease, like clogged arteries. But, he says, 75% of people on statins don't fall into that category. For healthy people, the reduction in mortality is tiny, like more 0.6%. So he's asking, why was he taking this drug for potentially 50 years with such a small benefit, especially considering side effects like muscle pain? He also points towards the money involved, pharmaceutical marketing, notes that when statins went generic around 2012, maybe prescriptions started dropping.
Interesting point, and this connects to something else he brings up, the classic French paradox.
Yeah.
He mentions Hannah Sutter's book, noting France has a super low death rate from heart disease, like 0.2%, lowest in Europe. Despite having the highest intake of saturated fats, lots of people who don't exercise much, and smoking more than the UK, for example, his suggestion. They eat more natural animal fats, fresh ingredients, cooked meals, basically like we used to.
Which leads us straight to his issue with vegetable oils. Corn oil, sunflower oil, soya oil. He says they're marketed as heart healthy, but they're packed with pro-inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids, and they have almost zero anti-inflammatory omega-3 or omega-9. He argues this massive imbalance. He says Western diets are often 30 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3, when ideally it should be closer to 4 to 1, drives widespread inflammation, which he links to all sorts of degenerative diseases. He calls these industrially processed oils unnatural. I mean, think about it. You just crush an olive to get olive oil. Compare that to the complex extraction for corn or soy oil. He contrasts them with traditional fats like butter, lard, duck fat used for centuries, and makes his interesting point. If farmed fish and animals get flabby from eating wheat and soya feed, well, maybe humans do too. So zooming out a bit, his big argument is that the whole healthy eating brigade, as he calls them, has actually presided over a decline in health.
Yeah, and he really targets specific areas, starting with carbohydrates and obesity.
Right. He takes aim at official advice, like the NHS Eat Well guide here in the UK. It says base your meals on starchy foods, bread, cereal, potatoes, like a third of your intake. He calls that bad advice. Says it either makes you gain weight or just makes it super easy to overeat. And he points out the obvious. Obesity rates have exploded in the last 30 years while this advice has been dominant, his conclusion. Fat doesn't make you fat, carbs do. Pretty blunt. He even says he tried eating bread again 3 times after quitting. Each time, indigestion, sore gut. And he notes that Sweden, way back in 2008, officially said low-carb diets were scientifically sound for tackling obesity and type 2 diabetes.
And sticking with carbs, or things often found in healthy diets, he also goes after soya. When he looked back at his vegan diet, he realized it was super high in copper but low in zinc. Why? All the nuts, seeds, beans, pulses, soya, whole grains he was eating. He mentioned some research linking that specific mineral imbalance to fatigue and depression. He actually believes soya was a core driver of his IBS and maybe his partner Dawn's thyroid issues and depression too. He points out soya contains phytic acid, which makes it hard to digest, causes gas, the feeling, and it's everywhere. He says it's in like 2/3 of processed foods in the US and UK now. He really doesn't hold back on processed soy like TVP or HVP. Calls them contrived. Says nuclear waste is possibly more natural. Ouch.
Wow. And he doesn't stop there. Sugar and artificial sweeteners are next. He knows he ate a lot of sugar as a kid, but points out the massive amounts consumed now, like 175 pounds per person per year in the US. The UK isn't far off. But the really big worry for him now, artificial sweeteners. He calls them excitotoxins, basically substances that overstimulate brain cells. He asks, why isn't anyone worried that they're frying your brain? Especially since they hide in ingredients lists as natural flavoring, spices, yeast extract, textured protein, soy protein extract makes it hard to avoid. He figures if junk food makes kids hyperactive, these chemical additives probably affect adults too, right?
He even takes a swing at the sacred cow. The 5-a-day fruit and vegetable campaign says it may have been overstated.
Absolutely. He points to a big Harvard study. It found only a modest benefit from eating more fruit and veg, mostly for heart disease, not really for cancer. And it wasn't even statistically significant. He thinks about his own experience, eating maybe 15 portions a day for over 20 years. It doesn't do me much good, he says, his take. Most veg aren't actually as nutrient-dense as animal products. The campaign gave them this almost mythic status. He suggests limiting high-sugar fruits like bananas and melons, prefers low-sugar berries, and fruit juice. He completely cut it out, sees it as a bizarre, intense form of freaky food. Basically, another processed food.
Even salt doesn't escape his skepticism. Another thing we're always told to cut back on.
Yep. He says the idea that salt is bad for all of us is a tad contentious, to say the least, and for most people, he calls it utter bollocks. He learned to fear salt in his whole food days, but now thinks it's just scaremongering nonsense.
Yeah.
And one more, modern milk. He draws this stark contrast between, say, raw Jersey milk straight from a farm and the stuff in cartons. Homogenized milk, he explains, is basically milk squirting through a fine sieve against a hard surface to smash up the fat molecules. Why? Just so you don't have to shake the bottle before pouring. He thinks the rise in lactose intolerance might be linked to these processes, pasteurization and homogenization, calls modern milk a mass-produced industrial fluid. And he notes how hard it is to even get raw milk legally in many places. Almost banned except at the farm gate or mail order in England and Wales. Totally illegal in Scotland. So, okay, pulling this all together, what's the message for us listening?
He's basically arguing that a lot of standard healthy eating advice is just flimsy. Little more than supposition of equivocal research and twisted interpretation, he says.
He's genuinely angry about what he sees as bad information coming from doctors and health authorities.
Which makes you ask why? Why the disconnect? He offers a few thoughts. Maybe GPs just aren't trained deeply in nutrition. That's one possibility. Another is funding bias in research. Interested groups want them to come up with specific results. Money talks. He even questions the whole peer-reviewed stamp of approval, says it matters less whether it's peer-reviewed and more whether it's actually right. He uses Ben Goldacre taking down flawed, holistic ideas as an example, but also notes most of us just absorb food ideas by osmosis, right? We don't know the studies or who paid for them.
Right. And for him, this big dietary shift wasn't just about health. It felt like reconnecting with his, sort of, food heritage, getting away from the insane modern food world with all its ads and weirdness. His core belief seems to be, the one-size-fits-all healthy eating advice is ridiculous. It just doesn't work for everyone. It's all about finding what really suits you personally.
And thinking bigger picture, he does wonder about industry influence, like the huge grain industry. They wouldn't exactly welcome a mass shift away from carbs, would they? Think of the economic impact. He suggests we kind of stumbled fairly blindly into this expansion of the processed food industry, just chasing taste and convenience, and maybe lost our ability to think about food sensibly.
So, based on all this, what does he actually recommend? He has this kind of grandparent test for food choices. First, organic, free-range meat and eggs. Better for the soil, avoids pesticides, antibiotics, he reckons. For beef, definitely grass-fed. Avoid the stuff fattened on wheat and soya. Venison, go for wild if you can, not farmed. And remember, it's lean, so cook it with plenty of fat. Milk. If possible, find raw Jersey milk. He loves the taste, believes it's healthier. Avoid the homogenized, pasteurized stuff. Cooking fats. Lard, duck fat, goose fat, extra virgin coconut oil are his go-tos. Olive oil, just for salads, not high heat. Fruit and veg. Ditch the high-carb potatoes and sugary fruits. Focus on low-sugar berries, apples, pears maybe, but don't try to fill up on veg. Use fat to feel satisfied. Drink water. No fruit juice, no artificial sweeteners. Oh, and he jokes he avoids green tea because it hasn't made him middle class. Grains, he eats none. No wheat, no others. Except maybe a tiny bit of wild rice, which he points out is technically grass anyway. Argues modern wheat is totally different from older varieties due to hybridization. And sweeteners, none at all. Not even honey, agave, maple syrup. Calls them all pure carbohydrate. He knows it sounds freaky weird. He admits that. But then he says, there's nothing wrong with freaky weird. Without freaky weird, there'd never be any progress. He pushes back against the idea that quality of life means beer, chips, pies. Says for many, swapping those for better health isn't really a hardship. Choosing not to eat something tasty but unhealthy isn't deprivation, he argues. We shouldn't act like spoiled brats about food. So, wrapping up this deep dive, we're left with this really strong challenge, aren't we? His core argument. The current information status quo on healthy eating, it's giving us worse and worse results, and the reasoning behind it is severely flawed or certainly questionable. His story is a powerful reminder, I think, that your own personal experience listening to your body, sometimes that tells you more than the mainstream advice everyone repeats.
Absolutely. This whole deep dive really pushes us, doesn't it? To think about how we apply knowledge to our own lives, our own unique situations. It's a huge encouragement for critical thinking, for questioning assumptions, especially about something as basic as what we eat every day.
Yeah, and maybe the biggest takeaway is this thought. We live in this world with just incredible food abundance, right? We're told we can have it all, indulge ourselves constantly, but maybe, as this author suggests, real health actually comes from not doing that. From finding a more disciplined path that works for you, not just blindly following some one-size-fits-all rule book. So what really stands out to you after hearing all this? How might you start to, question the conventional wisdom in your own life? Maybe forge your own path when it comes to food.